Would you give up your current lifestyle to live in a town that is promised to be perfect, with no government to control what you say or do? Might seem like a great idea at first, but today's list is going to make you think otherwise. Smash that like button and subscribe to our channel, and now let's get on with it. Starting off this countdown, we have the Octagon City. This city was created in 1856 and was meant to be a place only for vegetarians to live in Texas. It got its name Octagon City due to the fact that their homes were shaped as octagons. The designer of the city believed that this was a more practical design for homes as it let in more light. Plus, he wanted the town square to also be an octagon shape. From there, the city was going to be made up of 4 octagon villages, farmhouses, and other public buildings. But it turned out to be nothing like the residents expected. About 60 families came from all over the country to live there, and they were all disappointed. Their homes were 16 by 16 windowless log cabins. Yeah, definitely not what they expected. Not only that, but they faced a number of other problems like lack of water, bad mosquitoes, and disease. This all contributed to the downfall of the city. But there are still a few octagon houses that remain there if you want to visit them today. Little fun fact. Moving on to number 9, we have Cloud 9. AKA the floating city. Yes, you heard me correctly, a floating city. During the mid-20th century, inventor Buckminster Fuller said that he was going to fix the overcrowding situation in Tokyo by creating a city in the sky. How was he gonna do this? Well, he was going to make a bunch of giant geodesic spheres and fill them with air. He planned on then heating the air with solar power or human activity, and then said that the sphere would just float. Now you might be like, well, won't they fly away? Don't worry, he thought this through. He would then anchor the sphere to mountains or other structures to keep them from flying around. Obviously, for many reasons, this was a complete fail and the city was never built. In our 8th spot, we have the Death Star. Any fans of Star Wars here? Well, did you know that in the late 16th century, the Venetian Republic created a brand new city that was basically like the Death Star in Star Wars? It was known as Palmanova. It was meant to be a utopia for its residents, but also a military force. It had high walls, a moat, and other defenses to keep enemies out. The only problem is that people refused to live there. They thought it would entice the Ottomans to try and attack them. Like, by creating something to keep people out, we'll just make them want to try and get in. So Palmanova was a flop. Nowadays, it's a popular tourist attraction though. Moving on to number 7, we have Forlandia, Brazil. In 1927, Henry Ford thought it would be a good idea to create a massive rubber plantation in the jungles of Brazil. He named it Fordlandia. He designed the towns to have swimming pools, a golf course, and bungalows. So it sounds pretty nice, right? A utopian community in the middle of the Brazilian jungle. Well, think again. Ford's plan was to get a lot of rubber from the trees of the Amazons for car tires and such. He was in the middle of a rubber shortage, so he thought he would outsource Brazil. But unfortunately, his whole plan failed. The trees ended up getting a bad leaf fungus and died. Then his team and him got into multiple disputes with the Brazilian laborers, and then they started a number of riots. It was a pretty big fall, so he shut it down in 1945 and sold the land to the Brazilian government. All that remains there are a couple of structures overgrown by nature. Moving on to number 6, we have the Drop City. Drop City was founded in 1965 by a bunch of students who joined forces to buy a plot of land in Colorado. They wanted to create a utopian commune for artists or creative people. It was named Drop City because the idea was you drop out of your current city and join this one. So they marked the community as a place where creative people could share meals and ideas, where everybody had a say and nobody ran the show. Turns out that a lot of people were here for this. In fact, they had a huge influx of people into their community that they actually started suffering from overcrowding. Then they suffered from personality conflicts, and by 1968 the city was abandoned. The structures have since been dismantled, but there are still some ruins left there. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Magnitogorsk. Created under the rule of Stalin, this town was supposed to be an industrial powerhouse and a worker's paradise. Everyone was going to live in a large community with apartment blocks and endless sunlight. Children would have places to play, and residents would compete against each other to improve this city. But that never happened. When volunteers first arrived to build the city, there was absolutely nothing there, so they had to sleep in tents in the freezing cold winter temperatures. During the first winter, tons of workers died. In fact, they would have carts sent out around the camp each morning to collect all the bodies. Then in the summer, they faced terrible dust storms that buried workers alive. In less than a year, so many workers passed away that all the volunteers were like, F this, and then they fled. To make matters worse, when the workers left, thousands of prisoners were sent to take their place, and it turned into a giant slave labor camp. In our fourth spot, we have Pruitt, Igoe. In 1949, architect Minoru Yamasaki was going to create a community that would change US housing forever. He created 17 apartment buildings that were 11 stories high on the edge of St. Louis and called it Pruitt, Igoe. It was said to be a paradise for middle-class individuals. The grand opening of this town was broadcast in 1954 on live TV. That same year though, the Supreme Court declared segregation in schools was unconstitutional. Well, all the residents in this town were white, and then they were scared that people of color were going to be allowed to live with them, so they left. And that is extremely messed up. As a result, Pruitt, Igoe became completely abandoned. At one point, raw sewage was flowing down the hallways of the apartment buildings. That's how neglected it became. But it was the perfect place for drug gangs to set up shop and for poor individuals to live. And that's what they did. Soon it became a very dangerous housing project. By 1972, the buildings were demolished. Moving on to number 3, we have the nudist colony. If you're an open and free individual who hates wearing clothes, then this community would have been perfect for you. Founded in 1895 in Washington State, this community was supposed to be a place where people could do whatever they wanted. In the end, they accidentally created a nudist colony. People were like, screw clothes and government rules, let's just walk around naked. But not everyone was keen on this. As a result, it started a war between the nudes and the prudes, as they called it. These groups would fight constantly. Eventually, it was so bad that it led to the fall of the community after about a decade. In our second spot, we have Boozetown. Imagine living in a town where you can drink all the time and be surrounded by alcohol 24/7. Well, that was the idea for this next town, Boozetown. In 1952, Mel Johnson created the idea, a city built on booze. Every street would have alcohol stores, and the town would run on their own currency called booze bucks. On top of that, bars, clubs, and liquor stores would be open 24/7. They would never close. For obvious reasons, no children were allowed inside, but they did offer daycare services located just outside the city. They even said that they would have their own police system, but the police weren't like regular cops. No, they were called the party police, and instead of fining drunk people, they would act as caregivers and give drunk people aspirin and then help them home. Obviously, this is a terrible idea, and it was dropped by 1960. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Fruitlands. Founded in 1843 in Harvard, Massachusetts, Fruitlands was meant to be a utopian community for vegans. But the community was very, very strict. They were only allowed to drink water, nothing else. And no animals were ever to be used in farming. The most ridiculous thing of all was that they weren't allowed to even plant or grow root vegetables because it was said to disturb the worms. In the end, by the winter of that year, the community was completely out of food, forcing their residents to leave. Nowadays, the original farmhouse is still there if you want to visit. It's just been turned into a museum. Alright guys, that's all for today's video. Let me know in the comments below if you had to live in one of these towns, which one would you choose to live in? Let me know, I'm actually curious. And now, speaking of comments, let's move on to our comment shoutout portion. I'll be shouting out comments from the video, top 10 horrifying things recovered from China. Shura Pasang commented, shoutout, please. Well, just because you said please, here is your shoutout. Hope you're having an amazing day. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you smash that like button. Richard Sutherland commented, wonderful video. Did not know Chinese historical data was so interesting. Honestly, their history is very interesting. I love doing any kind of historical videos. And Edgar Garcia commented, so what about the werewolf? I have no clue what you're talking about. You're talking about Jacob from Twilight, or like, is there like an urban legend about like werewolves, or like does China have werewolves? I don't know. You gotta let me know. Alright guys, that's all the comments I'm shouting out for today's video. Make sure to comment something down below for a chance to be featured in my next comment shoutout. And as always, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to Most Amazing Top 10 for more amazing videos. I've been your host, Lindsay Ivan, and I'll see you when I see you.